Bo. There's actually no public members of the public here at this time. We do have members of our committee and auxiliary members and staff members via Zoom. That link on how to get to this meeting is on the agenda. There's actually no public members of the public here at this time. We do have members of our committee and auxiliary members and staff members via Zoom. That link on how to get to this meeting.
Oh, that's not good.
Oh, this one. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. And are we recording?
Yes.
Okay. Definitely don't want to hear don't want to hear me twice. Okay, so let's do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now committee members, anybody have any comments for items not on our agenda today?
Would we like to do roll call first?
Oh, thank you, Carol.
No problem. We'll start with Chairperson Jan Clark-Kretz.
I am here.
Bonnie London.
Oops.
I see her there.
Sorry, trying to fix the right button. I'm here.
Tim Underko.
Here.
Jean Wilson.
Here.
Beth Cohen.
Here.
Randy Elder.
He's here.
Auxiliary Member Ramona Brockman.
Here.
Auxiliary Member Greg Obranovich.
Here.
And I do not see AJ Moyer.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go right on back to any comment from our committee for items not on the agenda. Any public members? Hearing and seeing none. Will we have a motion to adopt our agenda for today?
I make a motion.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I so moved, Jean.
Okay, let's have roll call, please.
Yes, Randy Elder.
Aye.
He said aye.
Jean Wilson.
Aye.
Jan Clark-Kretz.
Aye.
Bonnie London.
Yes.
Tim Underko.
Aye.
Beth Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, now for public comment on consent agenda. Anybody have any comments on our consent agenda?
So any of our public members participating through Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to comment at this time.
All right, hearing and seeing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I so moved, Jean.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, we have a Jean and then Randy second. Roll call, please.
Yes, Jean Wilson.
Yes.
Randy Elder.
Aye.
Jan Clark-Kretz.
Yes.
Bonnie London.
Yes.
Tim Underko.
Aye.
Beth Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move right over to committee matters. Mary Beth?
Certainly, welcome everybody. Today is a continuation of our meeting from September 21st, so we'll pick it up where we left off at that time. Mark Teague from Placeworks. I don't see Lucy today, so Mark, you're flying solo. If you can do a quick committee status, get us back on track from where we left off, and then pick up our review of the general plan designations beginning at open space and conservation.
You bet. Thank you. Can everybody see that? I can make that a little larger.
A little bigger.
How's that?
There you go. That's good.
Okay. And at the last meeting, Jean had asked for some examples of units when we were talking about the table, which is up here. I think it's up there. Oh, no, it's down here. Doy. My apologies. It's down here. So when we get to that point, I do have some graphic examples to share with the committee. So this is where we left off. I believe we finished public, quasi-public, and now we're on open space and conservation.
That's correct.
The intent of this land use designation is to provide for an area that is not going to be developed, and it can be either public or private land. It is not something that is typically applied unilaterally, so it wouldn't be applied over somebody's private property without their permission. It would often be used by a developer or by the town itself if you purchased a piece of land or received a piece of land in dedication. An example might be a place to plant oak trees. And you would establish it as an open space conservation. Another example would be a trail, a piece of land that was not intended for development because of slope or marsh or you name it. And we may not have any on the map, or we could have a little bit on the map. Sometimes land use designation definitions are tools that you leave in your toolbox and only apply when you need them. Doesn't necessarily need to appear on the map if you don't need it. But this is one that staff believed was a good addition to the mix, and this is why the definition is here.
So I have a question on this. It says that this area is designated where development is precluded. And then
That's
the very
correct.
next sentence, it talks about development that's allowed to happen on it, which seems very.
Yeah, I know it does seem a little incongruous, doesn't it? I mean, from my perspective and from the perspective of most resource agencies, a trail is the same as a road, is the same as a shopping center. It's development, right? But most people refer to development as housing and roads and things like that. So maybe we need to wordsmith this so it's better. The idea here is that it's not a building. We're not building on it. But then again, you might have a restroom. You might have a trailhead that is still part of the open space area. So we didn't want to preclude it altogether. Open to ideas of how you want to do that. Christy, does the glossary give us any help there on what development is defined as?
I was muted. Let me pull that up. Hold on.
Okay. I agree, Beth. It's a little goofy as it is here. So open to ideas for wordsmithing this.
Do we just want to say where residential and commercial development is precluded or something? I mean, I don't know. Because restrooms is a clear development in my mind. I don't mind the trail part. But if you were going to allow restroom on that area, I don't think we can say development is precluded.
Fair enough.
In our glossary, we define development as the physical extension and or construction of urban land uses. So any construction activity or alteration of the landscape, its terrain, contour, or vegetation, including the erection or alteration of structures. It goes on to talk about what those activities could be. So construction, utilities, installation of septic systems, grading, fill materials, clearing of natural vegetation, vegetative cover. So it's pretty broad.
We could almost say, Beth, minimal. But I was afraid that that would leave a crack in the door where people would suddenly start thinking, well, one house is minimal or two houses. Anyway.
Or we could say something like where the only development allowed is trails, restrooms, and public serving improvements. If we wanted that.
Oops.
Or maybe you could use the word like supportive facilities. In other words, like, it would be a storage shed or for gardening tools and landscaping, et cetera.
Right, tie it back to that use.
I apparently This is where track changes on. All right. Why are you not? Oh, I know why it's not showing up. There we go. One of the only development.
Yeah.
How about that? Is that better?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, we might need something like parking lot, and if we have a restroom, we might need septic, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to get into septic and whatnot, but
No, I just was saying we might, I
Yeah.
wouldn't make a laundry list of things it might be. It's just,
okay. Yeah,
we
you're
have
right.
to-
Yeah.
we have to recognize that to use some of these things might need some things. I don't even know if you need to put in parking. It's just
Okay. I'd prefer to leave it out, but
that I didn't mean you had to put it in either.
But
Okay.
I would leave it out, keep it simple.
fair enough.
Now, if we had had this, we have, for instance, Montserrat subdivision has an agricultural preserve, but that's not this kind of open space. They also have the conservation things, but they're all part of, they're all handled by the Wildlife Heritage Foundation, but they are all part of people's 4.6 acres. They just can't use all of it. They have to stay in the allotted building envelope. But this wouldn't include that kind of thing, or would it?
I suppose it could. It all depends on how it needs to be configured. Or, I mean, that falls under the umbrella. You could have private conservation as well as public conservation. That's why it allows either. The idea is that something shows up on the map, not just in some sort of CCNR or some sort of deed restriction, that everybody knows that you can't build on it. That's all.
Maybe it would be a good idea for us to see the definition of conservation as well.
Sure. So we have conservation and conservation area. And I believe you would want conservation area. So that is a public or private area protected in order to maintain or improve sensitive or highly valued resources and functions, including natural, scenic, ecological, historic, agricultural, hydrological, or geological resources. Secondary uses may be accommodated in conservation areas, such as a passive park use, provided they do not impact the primary uses for which the area is protected. I could screen share, but Mark, I'm afraid I might bump you out.
That's fine.
And then that particular definition, just want everybody to know, is an add. It's coming from the unadopted 2010 Parks and Rec. So it's actually, this would be a new definition.
That definition I just read is what we had discussed during our Parks and Rec and Open Space Committee meeting.
Right, okay. But I know that this group has gone through all the definitions to a certain point, isn't that right? So they would not have seen this, correct?
Right, this is another change.
Thank you.
And this is Bonnie. If I remember correctly too, we were going to be talking at the next Park and Rec meeting about how to calculate the parks and open space.
The Parks and Rec Committee did a consensus on calculation of parks and open space, and that was 5 acres per 1,000 people.
I didn't think that we actually addressed the open space issue. And I tried to find it on YouTube, but it's not there.
So Bonnie, what I remember is that we found out, Anders told us that it comes from the subdivision, something in the subdivision. And then what we put, I think, was that we were going to go back to the subdivision rules and sort of clarify that.
That's right.
So I don't think anything was decided about it. We just kind of noted that it's there, and it's 5 acres for parks. Our committee voted for 5 acres for parks, but there is also this existence of the 5 acres for open space in something else.
Yes, that's correct. In the subdivision code, there is 5 acres for parks and 5 acres for open space. And that would need to be corrected to conform with the general plan.
And this is Jean, I had sent a note to Mary Beth, and she may have forwarded to Christy for when we get back, when the open space, the Parks and Rec Committee meets again, because I wanted to make sure that there are no conflicts in whatever definitions we're doing here, considering that in the past, when we said parks and open space, what we meant by that was the fee and set aside impact fee for active parks, and open space essentially meant passive park open space fee. And so I just wanted to make sure that when we're going through these definitions, we somehow don't lose sight of that. Now, that's something that I assume will be taken up again with the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee. And I think Bonnie is correct. I think we're going to come back to that there.
That's correct. And the next Parks and Rec Committee is next Thursday, 6 o'clock.
Anybody have any comments on the open space and conservation description there?
So if someone wanted to keep their land in agriculture and not get it developed, they could put an ag conservation on it according to the conservation area definition that Christy gave us.
I would believe
Sounds
so,
like
yes.
it could-
Yes.
Yeah. Does that conflict at all with our definition? Anything here? Because that could have farm buildings, for instance.
No, I
it's
would think
obviously-
that, I think that'd be supportive construction, so pole barns, things like that. But I don't know necessarily that if somebody wanted to have a conservation easement, they would necessarily have to be, that the land use designation would necessarily change. They could put an ag conservation easement on their land and keep whatever land use designation they already have.
Correct.
Those are not the same thing.
Okay, so we're just saying this is a possibility, but you don't have to put a conservation
That's correct.
designation just because you put some kind of a conservation easement or something on it. Okay.
That is correct. And often I see this applied retroactively. Somebody puts a conservation easement on their land, decades go by, and then finally the agency decides when they update their general plan to go ahead and map it. And you'll see that, or it goes on slopes at the time of development, those types of things. But it would be an unconscionable burden to somebody wishing to preserve their ag and then force them to do a general plan amendment. That would just be insult to injury to my way of thinking. But they're not required. You could do an ag easement, or you can do a conservation easement without having a general plan amendment.
Anybody have any other things they want to add or that they might disagree with on the open space and conservation description?
Mark,
Any
do
mem-
you see any conflict or potential conflict between talking about parks and trails in this definition, where we also talk about parks in the public, quasi-public designation?
To me, this is parks with a little p. To me, this is where Dean was talking about just an open field like we used to play on as kids, and not park with a bunch of ball fields and diamonds and things that have organized recreation. I suppose somebody could get pedantic and get all excited about it, but from my perspective, I think it's okay if they overlap. When we talked about this with the Parks and Rec Committee, we talked about the fact that you might have an open space conservation area with a park in the middle of it that has a different designation, right? And the trails and whatnot leading to it or out from it might be something different, but you might have an organized area within it. I mean, we could say private open space, but then do we have a definition for open space?
Yeah, I think we do, yes. Hang on.
Beginning to think we should have done the glossary first in this.
So our open space, and this is what we discussed at the parks meeting, was open space is an area where there are no improvements, but rather an emphasis on keeping the land in its natural state and may include conservation areas. Open space may surround areas of passive or active park. Sorry.
Right. And getting to Beth's point, and I think it's a correct one, is that, some of this constitutes development and would not be a natural state.
It's also assuming that open space is different than passive park. If it says it's surrounding active or passive park.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to need to reconcile all these definitions at some point.
I think that's after we get done with this section, then we'll back into the glossary.
Okay.
And then part of that reconciliation, Gene, may be that we have to come back and tweak some wording here so that it says what we want it to say.
Mark, would you mind putting that in the column there to remind us?
Oh, let's do it here. So if we've stared at this wording long enough and nobody feels strongly either way, is it safe to move on?
I think so. And is there any members of the public that have anything they want to say? I think so. Nope, let's move on then.
I saw a member, there we
Oh,
go, Miguel. Whoops. Miguel, go ahead, just unmute.
Okay. Well, I wasn't at the Park and Recreation meeting. My understanding was they eliminated the requirement for open space for subdivisions or lots or whatever. Is that correct?
No, we just had a consensus on the 5 acre per thousand park land, and that we were going to go back and relook at what is in the subdivision what it says about 5 acres per open space in the subdivision requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so probably the meat and potatoes of any land use element is the density table. And as we mentioned previously, now that we're done with the text up here, the plan is to put this text in this column here so that the definitions appear, because this column will be unnecessary. This was only done for the committee's consideration. So that text will appear here. So you'll have on one page the summary of what's going on. We ended here, and that's why all this is in this purple, which I'll get rid of. So I've changed it to yellow. Very clever, Teague. There we go. So this is all the meat and potatoes part of the general plan. Now, Jean had asked for an example. Jean or Bonnie, I can't remember, had asked for an example of various densities. So I had my staff put together various densities at various in examples of development of various densities. So you have street view, you have plan view, and try as we might, there just aren't a lot of town level examples to be used in this. And we didn't go out and recreate the wheel. I suppose we could have spent a couple of months putting it together. So try as you might to ignore some of these are just not suitable, I think, for Loomis in terms of design. But the thing that was critical was, as part of the discussion, was there was this belief that we get to higher densities. It meant 4, 5, 6, 10-story high rises and all sorts of fears associated with that. So I had them go through, this is 5 to 10. Now, some of these are front loaded, some of these are alley loaded. Alley loaded is very popular right now, but jury's still out on that. And then we went to, so I had them provide both just so because the town has some issues with that. And then we also have 10 through 25. And you'll see that all of these are 3 stories or less. I have no idea what happened down here. That looks like some sort of Salvador Dali plan view. My guess is that it somehow got messed up. So I apologize for that. UA will be mortified to know that's what it shows up. She's such a perfectionist. And there's just no way this would appear in Loomis. Please tell me you wouldn't allow that. That's really urban. I happen to like it from an aesthetic, but it's not a Loomis thing. So anyhow, this was necessary because the table that we're talking about talks in these numbers, and the question the committee had was, well, what does that look like on the ground? And this is what this provides. Okay, so having that, we have these numbers here. Now these numbers, and I apologize for the size of the table, it has to kind of get down because we have this. Here we have density and intensity with coverages. And the question was whether you want to keep them the same or revise them. And we were okay. We stopped here, I believe.
So I think it might be interesting too, Mark, to maybe do a little bit more explanation on 40%, and can you kind of walk us through that verbally? Because I know that was part of the questions and the things that would be put on there and what wouldn't be. And I know Sean had a comment too, I believe, on one of these. So
okay, we can do that. Christy, help everybody out, and let's talk about what coverage means. Do you have a definition from the glossary to share with the crew?
Hang on one moment.
Is it lot coverage maybe? I don't see coverage in there.
Site coverage.
Site
Site
coverage.
coverage. So for site coverage, we have the percentage of total site area occupied by structures and impervious surfaces, such as driveways and patios. Structure or building coverage includes the primary structure, all accessory structures, and architectural features. Structure/building coverage is measured from exterior wall to exterior wall.
Okay, so the remaining area then would be required setback. So that would be lawn area and whatnot. So if you go to a graphic like this, and we go to 10, 10, let's go to the other one. Let's go to 10 units to the acre. You can see that most of the site is taken up by most of the structure here covers the site. At 7 to the acre, you might be able to get closer to that 40%. But if you're including driveway, and then I would assume any impervious surface would also include sidewalk to get to your backyard, any patio that would be in the backyard, you're going to cover most of the lot at smaller sizes. 40% for this density would basically preclude development at that density. So for something like that, you probably go the 60 or 65% density to coverage to do that. Some agencies only cover the main structure because the rest of it is essentially pervious to eyesight, right? It's an open space area, but others have the definition that Christy left. So you can see that once the density starts to go up, you have more coverage of the parcel at hand because you need more impervious surface to provide surfaces.
Our last general plan definition for site coverage did not include impervious areas such as patios and driveways and sidewalks. So do we have a compelling need to add that? And then if we are adding that, then we do need to change our percentage, our allowable lot coverage percentage, or do we not add that because we never have historically, and I don't believe it's been causing a problem. And then in which case we just leave the percentages alone. I mean, why were they added? Jean, have you seen problems at the counter?
I'm not the one at the counter, but I guess my 2 cents on this would be maybe because of, I don't know why it was added here, but I know that one of my concerns with the village alley loaded was that there was hardly any non-impervious space left on the entire alley loaded area. There was a little bit a few feet in the front of the house and a 2-foot utility strip along the back, and that was it. No place really for planting trees or greenery. And from my perspective, that's a problem for heat island effect. So I think it's unrealistic to have 40% if that's our definition. But I don't know how to pick what's the right amount. And so maybe Mark can help guide us on that. I don't know about, is 65% reasonable, and for what kind of density is that reasonable? I don't know, but I would be concerned if we just say, oh, cover over as much as you want, because that's not, I don't think that's a healthy thing to do.
Fair enough.
Beth, you work with general plans. What have you seen? Do you recall, Beth, or?
Well, I think a lot of agencies do include impervious areas in their definitions, but you know, we'd have to open, if we really want to compare our town to other communities, we'd have to do a side-by-side comparison of their 6 dwelling unit per acre versus ours and find out what the percentage is, because the percentage should change if you're going to add impervious. I just don't know what that number should land on. I don't want to just make it up.
Yeah, right. Mark, what's your experience say?
My experience says that these are low, but they're low for more urban communities. They're not necessarily low for rural communities and towns such as yourself. All right. We have a lot to get through today. We're not going to end. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this in purple again. And then we'll come back. I'll come back with more information for the committee. And I'll compare it to other similar rural towns, particularly mountain towns or things like that, where we might have a little bit of comparative analysis, and then do a little deeper dive into this so that you have some other agencies. Are there other towns that you'd like to use as a reference that would be useful for that comparison? Otherwise, I'll just pick a handful.
Hey, Mark, this is Bonnie. Sonoma would be a nice one to take a look at.
Which one?
City of Sonoma.
Got it.
Something else while Mark is doing this for the committee to think about is, instead of 60% coverage, 20% is going to be in green space or some form of open space. Gene was absolutely correct. Is the way the ordinance is right now, you could go in and cover the whole thing with a parking lot and not have any green space. So this coverage pretty much assures into the town of Loomis there's some green space.
Okay. Part the way there with the graphic, not all the way there with the data. So let me come back with some more information for the committee. And then we'll dial this in. And I like what Andy's saying. Maybe we have a percentage for the building coverage, and then we have a percentage of required landscaping, which would not be beyond the pale either. So, I mean, generally, the higher the density, the greater the coverage, just because of building size and parking. All right, so if we leave that for the time being, and then do you want me to also include the non-residential coverages as well, just for grins and giggles?
Yes, please.
All right.
Mark, since you removed specific plan from above, probably should remove it from this table here.
Good call. And that pretty much ends this. This is simply right out of the general plan currently. So at this point, it's the Christie show with the glossary. So I will stop sharing and we can go through the dictionary.
Sounds good. Let me do a little screen sharing. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And we
Little
left off, sorry, look away as I scroll through 500 pages. And my apologies, I had made some updates based on our Parks and Rec meeting, and I failed to give that to Mary Beth to distribute to you all. So my apologies there. Do you want to take up where we left off at high occupancy vehicle, or would you like to go back and look at the changes that came out of our last review of the glossary?
So are you asking us to go back to looking at things that we didn't see last time because you had made some updates? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Do you want to go back to those, or do you just want to move on and then we'll do one large return at the end of all of the previous?
Yeah,
changes?
Maybe one large return at the end, because there are some other committees that are meeting that will be able to capture those changes all at once then.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. So we will pick up at high occupancy vehicle. Let me unhighlight this for you. So on your screen, you should probably see high occupancy vehicle through about hotel or motel.
Correct.
Does anyone have any comments on any of those definitions?
Need to give us a little time to look at it. then.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Christy, on that homeless definition, that's from the old general plan, or is that that section, is that a new?
Anything that's new, I will have underlined,
Okay.
so you could see that. Looks like Ramona has a question.
Yeah, and historic and historical, is there any way to include landscape into that? So since we're an agricultural town or focused on agriculture, is there any way to include like a landscape in there that would be a historical landscape, like an orchard or something like that? So include landscape.
Sure.
In the
I think that's covered under site, so an historic building or site.
No, it's
Okay.
not. There needs to be a historical landscape.
Okay.
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 Yeah. For the benefit of the committee, a historical landscape can include several sites, not just one. And yeah, it's becoming a thing. It's also a thing when we talk with the tribes. So a definition would be helpful.
Okay.
Would
So
we
this-
also need to update historic preservation to encompass landscape? Because it's just kind of focusing on structures and neighborhoods. Because you could restore or rehabilitate a historic landscape as well.
Yes. I think you could just add landscape to that.
Yep.
Any other comment on these?
Is this definition of homeless currently acceptable?
I believe it is. So there is a consistency check with the the housing element. So I think we are okay.
Okay.
And Andreas isn't here, but I'm going to speak for him. That the last sentence of that homeless can just go away.
The C emergency shelter.
No, the California housing element law and all that nonsense, that should just come out.
Okay.
It's not relevant. And yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Ramona has her hand up.
For
Ramona?
for home occupation, do we want to limit the definition to employing only the occupants of the dwelling? Or would there be instances where you would want to limit maybe outside employees to like 1 or 2 people.
That's a good point.
That should be in the in the zoning ordinance, not in the well, hold it, this glossary is for everything, but that would also be a regulation. So I'm thinking, if you want somebody from outside the occupants of the home working on there, that should go in here, but the number, et cetera, should probably come under the subdivision ordinance. I'm the zoning code rather than the definition.
If you go to our ordinance, that's exactly where it's completely spelled out as to employees or no employees, the amount of traffic based on your normal neighborhood, all that is spelled out in the weeds picture in the zoning code.
And typically, home occupations are for the person living in the dwelling, no employees. That way you're not creating additional parking issues and things like that. No signage. There's really no flavor of a business being conducted inside there.
So shall I strike this section?
So Carol, are you saying that we do allow it under some circumstances? Or are you saying
There has been a history of that, because say if we have a swimming lessons place that has been approved in a residential home occupation, that has been an employee has been allowed. But for the most part, even if you go to our business license, it says no employees allowed. It's spelled out really as far as everything, as far as their uses. But I would also say daycare centers, if it's a six person or less daycare center, which is basically in essence regulated by the state, but they do have a business here in town and they are allowed to have an assistant there. So I don't know how much we want to get into the weeds on this, other than to say that that it's very spelled out in the zoning code what's allowed where.
What you may want to do is, Christy, keep that in there, and instead of saying only, just say employing the occupants at the building, and then the code would say, this way at least it says the occupants of the building have to be part of
The employees.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, anything else on your screen?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to tell you that the historical building definition isn't true.
This one.
No, the one below it.
This one.
45 years.
That's not the definition of a historic building. Close. I'll work with you on a definition, but anything can be historic. We start looking at 45 years. And then, but the town can actually decide that there's a building that's historic. The definition comes from the Division of Interior. So just, Division of Interior, definition of historic building. And it essentially follows along with the historic and historical above it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, if you have historic, I kind of like the way that is. I don't know that you need the one below it. Maybe we just delete it.
Possibly. I'll check the conservation
Okay.
element to make sure we're not referencing something like that and then referencing it wrong in the glossary.
Right. I mean, 45 years is just the thumbnail where we start thinking about it.
Right. No, there's all sorts of rules for that. So
Exactly. Yeah. We've all been bitten by them over the years. The critical piece to me is the town has the ability to say that it's historic, whether anybody else likes it or not. And that triggers everything from CEQA and everything. So that is within the purview of the town. So that kind of needs to be in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I believe I have a definition somewhere else that we can use for that. So
okay. If not, I know I have one too.
Okay. Let me just put that in another color.
I'm sorry, Christy, I should have caught that before.
No, I should have caught that. Going through this, there's just so many of them. Okay, so can we move on to the next page?
I don't see anybody with their hand up.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So now we have household through housing and urban development. And then you'll see on household pets, I've added C, animal keeping, which is above. And then a little clarification on the housing element and those cycles. It used to just say every 5 years, but that's not exactly the case.
Under housing element, it's no longer 7 mandated elements. Why don't you just say one of the mandated elements of the general plan?
I shouldn't have done that. Let me do that.
It's hard because for the last 40 years, I've, 7's all they've
I
had.
know. I know. And then you never know what else they'll add in a year or two.
No person's liberty is safe while the legislature is in session. Why don't you just say under state law, housing elements must be up. I don't even know you need that for the definition. I would just kill that last sentence.
Just completely delete it.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
Okay. Anyone else?
So under household pets,
Mm-hmm.
what is as determined by the director? Who's the director? What does that mean?
That would be Mary Beth.
You're going to determine our pets, Mary Beth.
Yeah, and the actual determination comes down from the zoning code under animal keeping. So maybe the reference, I would say take that out.
Let's delete this.
Yeah.
And leave the rest. And then the animal keeping section has all sorts of details on what that means.
And in this instance, animal keeping is referring to a glossary definition of animal keeping or the municipal code definition of animal keeping.
It's going to refer up to a glossary definition, which then also refers to the code because it's just too much information to keep in a glossary.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Good catch, Beth.
Yeah. I'm glad we go through this. It's
under households, number of persons. Why do we need the whole explanation of the definition? I don't understand. From line 11 to a line 15 is not definition, it's why it's there. I have a pet peeve about that sort of thing in definition. So personally, I would delete from line 11 to line 15. All we really need to say is the count of all year-round housing units occupied by one or more persons. And I'm not even sure one occupied, but if this is the census definition of households, that's fine. That's what I would defer to. But I don't understand. We don't need the word, the concepts and all that stuff in there unless there's something I'm missing.
No, this is just existing. So
yeah,
we can take that out if everyone agrees.
Take it out.
Okay, it's gone.
Is that the census definition for households, Christy?
I believe so, but it might need some updating.
Yeah, I
Let
would.
me double check this one.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on?
Yep.
All right.
Is there a local housing authority? What that LH, is there, do we have that? What is it? The local housing authority? Is there one that we're part of and I'm not even aware of it? Or is that what SACOG is doing? And their housing authority local,
Right.
what is that all about?
I believe that's where Section 8 is distributed from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to eliminate anything that we have in the housing element that's part of a program.
Okay,
There
that's
is,
fine.
yeah, there is a Placer County Housing Authority, Gene, and that's what
Okay.
their primary job is.
Okay, so the other three that you couldn't see previously are housing unit, identity, and image.
Should we add accessory dwelling unit here for housing unit?
Yes, yeah, that's very good. Good catch.
And under identity, I would be offended if we didn't put makes a town, city, place, or area. Oh, you should leave it. I like accessory.
Accessory. I'll put town first.
Absolutely, as it should be.
Do the same for image. It needs town.
Mm-hmm.
Not that one. There we go. Okay, I think we can move on. So we'll go impact through improvement.
Yeah, 6 through 9 can go away. Lines 6 through 9.
Yeah.
And take the others out. On line 15, the second sentence can go away. It's not definitional.
That's correct.
There goes our 75-page document.
I don't think so. Maybe you're at 74.
So in improvement, it has to be structural. Well, I guess structure or utilities. So it wouldn't include landscaping or anything like that. If we want to limit it, that's okay. I'm just asking.
I don't know. I think Gene has a point.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, does our definition of structure include things like fencing?
I don't know. I'd have to scroll through and then your eyes would all go crazy.
Okay.
Let me just put a note on this.
Okay. Because in an agricultural community, fencing is an improvement.
Right, right.
We do not have a definition for fencing in the glossary.
We have one for deer fencing.
Oh.
Yeah, I put up deer fencing once, only to come home and find deer trapped in my garden, eating and very happy.
That's why my garden fencing is all the posts are all knocked over from the deer that couldn't get out and kept throwing himself against the fence.
Yeah, and then I felt bad because I trapped the deer in there. I had to
I see the definition for impacted areas.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, so I know that's something that's been there before, but.
Yeah, and it has to do, it's sort of a housing term. So
Okay.
that's what that's coming from, why it's a little bit, doesn't sound quite normal. But it has to do with housing terminology.
The current definition, I don't know if you've changed it, but the current definition of structures, it specifically excludes swimming pools, fences, and walls.
Okay.
Walls used as fences.
Okay. So I'll do a little wordsmithing with that one and thinking about other things that we could include, because it's not just a building that's an improvement.
Does this have to do with what the county is going to tax us on? For instance, if I put in a gravel driveway, they don't tax me, but if I pave it, they will.
I don't know. This is an existing one, and I don't know that would make a difference in terms of the general plan. I think it's more important to put these other things on there that don't have to do with whether you get taxed or not.
And typically the things that will trigger reassessment is some kind of building permit, encroachment permit, that once it's final, that goes to the county. So if you need an encroachment permit for the apron portion of the new driveway where it connects to the public frontage, then that might reassess you, but I don't know that for certain. You could put up a tough shed that's 10 by 12 without benefit of a permit. That does not trigger reassessment.
Do we have a need for this definition?
It's used an awful lot in the zoning code.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily show up much in the general plan, but certainly in the zoning code, improvement is used. And I would argue too, Christy, that grading of land is also an improvement.
Yes, I would too.
And we use that when we do environmental documents.
Mm-hmm.
Or things like a septic system.
Exactly.
wells.
Yeah.
That, I would consider those utilities. but you're
Utilities,
absolutely
yeah.
right,
Oh,
Jean.
okay, okay.
Mhm.
Anyhow, you'll do some wordsmithing on that, and
Yeah, let me think about how to best put that. And then I will get back to you guys at the next meeting with that. Any comments on the important scenic resource definition? And this was taken from the unadopted 2010 Parks, Rec, and Open Space Master Plan. Is it something we want to include?
yes, and it also occurs to me that we should have a map of those because that triggers a separate analysis in environmental documentation.
Yes.
That's a trigger word, as you well know.
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to decide what these are? Because we don't have any right now other than perhaps gateways, but those aren't necessarily in a natural state.
Yeah, was this discussed by the Conservation Committee at all?
No.
Let's flag that one, and you and me and Mary Beth and whatnot put our heads together, because I think that if we're going to go here, we need to have a map, and the town needs to identify what these are, because it will have ramifications later for any future development. And for the edification of the committee, sometimes these can be views to the horizon. They can be, you know, as it points out here, even things like dark sky, the pastoral open space, farmland, those types of things. It all depends on what's important to the town. And the reason that it becomes important is that you can trigger additional aesthetic analysis and a specific impact under CEQA if somebody is going to change what the town has identified as an important scenic resource.
I wonder if we really want all that.
That could be another discussion. So when we come back, I'll work with Christy and Andy to have some additional discussion to help the committee figure that out.
Okay, shall I scroll? So we have industrial. We have something that said industrial park, office park. I didn't highlight this. That was kind of convoluted and had issues. And then we have industrial research and development. So just to clarify on the industrial park, office park. So this was an existing definition for both of them, industrial park, office park, a planned assemblage of buildings designed for workplace use, see workplace use. And as Jean pointed out in one of her comments, there is no definition for workplace use. And I would also argue that an industrial park and an office park are not exactly the same thing.
I agree with that. I think, you know, where I'll go with the definition of industrial. Everything after processing of consumer goods isn't really definition. That's something that needs to go, unless you want to define it by heavy industrial and light industrial. Is that something that we're trying to do? Is do all three terms in one definition, or would you pull it separately?
I think. Oh,
Well, we do have separate land use designations for those. So
there really should be a separate definition, I believe.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'll break this up into okay.
And we don't even have heavy industrial uses anyway.
Right. So I'm thinking we break this up into light and limited.
Yes, good call.
Chrissy, could we define that as industrial, comma, light and industrial, comma, limited then, so that industrial
Yes.
starts first? Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm, I've got my little note here.
I know this seems excruciatingly detailed to the committee, but I cannot tell you from a staff perspective how helpful this is. So I apologize if this just seems so monotonous, but oh my goodness, to have known that you've gone through this and know the definitions is so helpful.
Thank you, Mark.
Christy, how about a paragraph after industrial park, so office park stands alone?
Yeah, it'll get moved. It's alphabetically out of order. So I just wanted to put it here because that's where it used to be. So we can talk about it all together. So I have my little note, move alphabetically. Does anyone have any changes to what that text says right now? They're kind of the same, just one's industrial and one is office.
And that's important because I had someone tell me that industrial was allowed in office parks, and I said, no, it's not. And it may have been confusing because of this kind of definition that
Right.
I had before.
Right. Yeah, I would not recommend leaving them together.
And I don't know that we need a workplace use definition.
No, we don't. I've struck it and then I didn't add that.
Is there a reason why we want industrial research and development as a separate definition? I mean, is that?
It was there before.
Yeah, I just wonder, I mean, are those things that the town wants?
Is it to distinguish the things that we are not letting them have in that at the end?
Yeah, does not include soils and other materials testing labs or medical labs.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you can manufacture computers and telecommunication components, those are pretty nasty industries.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. To me, some of that falls into heavy industrial that I wouldn't think the town would be in favor of, no matter how pretty of a bow you put on it for research and development.
Can we put a note there to check with the zoning text to see if it's even allowed in any zone?
That's a good comment. I've worked in soils labs and they're not that big of a deal. You can do it in the back of an office, but maybe there's something missing. It's odd that you can build a computer, but you can't test soil.
And it might just be the age of the
Could be.
statistician.
Yeah, could be.
Is laboratory allowed someplace else? Is that why it's there? Like medical laboratory, it says.
Yeah, medical service, like a clinic, lab, or urgent care. I would assume that would be allowed in some other zoning district. I think this is highly related to the zoning code and what's allowed where.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like Mark said, some of this goes into a heavy industrial use, and we don't have that zone, so we may need to tailor it based on what's allowed in light industrial zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll do a little searching on that, see what we've got. Okay, now let's look at infill development through issues.
I would prefer that we use a different definition for infill than that. I'll get to the state has a definition for that.
Okay.
And it has to be surrounded by existing development, stuff like that. or largely surrounded, because otherwise I've had some pretty odd claims of infill.
Mhm.
And the reason it becomes important is there's an exemption in CEQA 15332 that allows you to exempt yourself from CEQA for infill. And we should just make sure those definitions are consistent so the town knows what infill is and what it isn't, and more importantly, what it isn't.
Hey, this is Randy Elder. Hey, Mark, I got a question for you. You typed in, check the state definition under the infill development.
Mhm.
Why would we not just bring over the state definitions for virtually all of these terms?
Sometimes the states define them and sometimes they haven't. And we've been pretty careful to ensure that we haven't gone against the state definition when it was appropriate. But many agencies can make their own definitions where there's flexibility. Some places there's flexibility, some places there isn't. And there's certain words that trigger certain other regulations. Like when we get down here, if the word significant is in here anywhere, I'll probably have a fit. But infill development has a specific connotation, and the state has established a whole series of laws that are separate, that are based on infill. But other things, the state is pretty loosey-goosey on the definitions. And to be perfectly honest with you, Randy, sometimes the state definitions differ depending on which agency or which year the legislation was adopted. It's a good question, though, and it's a good point. And where we can, we like to rely on definitions provided by higher up agencies, if you will. And in this particular instance, that's just my recommendation.
Right. Well, I don't mean to be beating it up, but it seems as though we're reinventing the wheel over and over again with this. And I would be strongly in favor, although we're, pardon me, so far into it, but I'd be strongly in favor of seeing if there's a better approach to this. We've still got a long way to go, don't we?
We do. Note that most of these, the majority, overwhelming majority, are existing definitions in your general plan and your zoning code.
Yeah. Okay, that's the point I just wanted to make.
No, you're absolutely, you're spot on, Randy.
Conditional use.
It's a brutal process, but a necessary one.
Every 20 years.
And if you have comments, you go back and you think, in the middle of the night, you have a thought about something, you can always just submit a comment. And like I've got some of Jean's right here and I appreciate it. It helps me to catch some things or catch inconsistencies. So you just send them in and we'll make sure they get in there.
But to Randy's point, part of the process is that you being our trusted advisors are implementing all of the new laws and all of the new things that we need to put in this that we might have missed. Is that true?
Yes. So part of this is also looking at all of our updates to the elements and seeing if we have different terminology in them that needs to be included. So you'll see on this page,
Communication space.
this actually needs to be underlined, but intelligent transportation systems, that's a new one right here.
Yeah. I laugh because that just basically means that two traffic signals can talk to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I was wondering where that came from.
But it sounds really fancy, doesn't it?
But if we're talking about it in the
Yes.
circulation element, we need to be able to define it so someone doesn't go, what is this? What does that mean?
It means more than that. I'm being a little facetious, but
That actually makes most sense.
So any comments on the remainder of the I words?
Is that definition of intermittent stream consistent with Cal Fish and Game?
It should be. I can double check it, but yes, that should be.
I had a question from last time. Last time, Mark, you said you were going to change all the wetlands references to riparian. And I was thinking, what happens then to isolated wetlands, which we do have occasionally? They're not part of, they're not really riparian in the sense of contributing to a stream, even, down, because they're just isolated and it's absorbed into the ground eventually.
If I said
I think
that,
that might have been in terms of talking about trails and park areas, perhaps.
Okay.
There was
because
something that we came across and you said, oh, that says wetlands, we're going to change all that to riparian.
I think it was
So
talking about conservation of riparian areas.
Yeah, I think there are two discrete. There's actually a gazillion different definitions that you have to go through for that, and they're not the same. Riparian is next to wet, and there are isolated wetlands, and depending on who's in the White House depends on where they are and what happens with them. But Cal Fish and Game has a pretty elaborate definitional process for that we would follow. So I apologize if I said all of them. Yeah, no,
Maybe I misunderstood then.
I think we were using the term previously, wetland, when we're really talking about a riparian corridor. And that's what that was from.
Let's hope so. Otherwise, I was just being.
No, I can recall with talking about the previous language had used wetland over and over versus riparian, which would be more appropriate for what we were talking about.
Do we really need a definition of issues?
It was there.
I know. I'm just scratching my head as to why you need to.
It's an issue. What's an issue?
That thing we're talking about, I just don't understand what it's called. Look it up in the glossary. All right.
So if it's unsettled, if we haven't decided, then it's an issue,
I guess.
Yeah.
What if we just disagree? How is that an issue? Anyway, if it's there, our mantra throughout this process has been, if there's no real reason to change it or we're not directed by a committee, then we leave it be.
Do we need it? What is it for?
It was
To
just
say
there.
that we have issues. We have had issues.
I mean, who thought to put that in there?
I know. From my perspective,
Gary.
I don't think you need it at all, but it's there. It's not
I
like
can easily delete it. So if
Is it to say that we haven't figured everything out yet? I mean, that's about the only reason I can see.
I'm wondering which element has issues in it that we'd have to refer to the glossary to identify.
Well, based on this one, it looks like it would be something related to land use.
Yeah.
Do we leave it in? Do we strike it out? Are we going to be positive or are we going to?
I say we just move past it and leave it. Somebody else,
All
let
right.
somebody else kill it.
Okay.
there you go.
Moving on.
Okay, we only have two J's, so Joint Powers Authority and Joint Use Agreement. Joint Use Agreement was added because we didn't have that definition in there before, and I know that is something that we've talked about with some of the other elements like recreation.
And my question on that, might we at some point have a joint use agreement outside the
Yeah.
town? For instance, with the county on, I don't know, recreation or
Yeah, I
some
don't know
other
why
kind
you-
of district?
I don't know why you'd limit it to within the town. What if it's like the trail maintenance folks or a nonprofit that does something for the, yeah, I don't know why you'd limit it within the town.
Right. So I have this note. So should we replace that with to broaden access for community use instead of this?
I
We
like
should-
that.
We should
Yeah,
stop.
that sounds good. I like that too.
What if it's, okay, never mind.
Not land related.
Now,
Well,
I know that Jean is our resident English teacher. But whenever I see in order to, I wonder if there's two words that don't need to be there. That's why Microsoft has it underlined in blue. It just should be authority to plan. You don't need the in order. But
Oh, yeah, that's just.
I'm actually surprised Jean hasn't.
Mr. Fry would say no unnecessary prepositional phrases.
I love it.
Okay.
Actually, he had a numbered system and for all the different errors you could make. And there were some that were fatal to your paper and some were just.
I'd love to see that. I would frame that and put it on the wall. I'd love that.
You never wanted a number 31, which was general incoherence.
I think that's just
Or
about
number 8, which was a spelling error.
Okay. So
What
we're
if
good
it
with-
was something like, well, we're not in, let's see, agencies or organizations between the town. Okay, so if it was, we aren't in the county transportation one, but if it were, that would fall under the JPA, I presume then. 2 or more units of government, I guess so. If
Mhm.
it's a joint agreement like that, okay.
Okay. So getting to K. And again, only 2 words in K. So we have kennel, animal boarding, and kitchen. And Jean, you'll notice on kitchen, I added some text so that we're talking about a real kitchen and not just a, a hot plate and a dorm refrigerator passing off as a kitchen.
Yeah, that falls under junior ADUs, right?
Yeah. So we want to make sure that we're not just, that we don't have units built with very little to them in terms of a kitchen.
So did these things came from some other place, I presume?
Yeah. Yes.
So an ADU has to have
A
all of
kitchen,
these
A
things.
kitchen.
a kitchen,
It
but
needs a kitchen.
a JADU doesn't.
Oh, junior does not, okay.
That's correct.
I think some of those definitions are getting way too overkill on detail. I mean, a refrigerator has to be at least 5 cubic feet. I mean, who
Yeah,
cares?
That's the state.
Oh, well, okay.
I agree with you. I mean,
But if it's less than 5 cubic feet, then it's
Not
not
a-
a kitchen.
I guess, right? And I'm surprised they don't have the color. It must be blue or green. It's ridiculous.
And then the drain, whatever.
Right.
What is less than 18 inches in depth? What is,
Oh, it's a misplaced period. There. A sink.
Why does that
Oh.
matter?
Wow.
less than 18 inches, a sink?
That's a pretty
I mean-
deep sink.
I mean, wide? My sink is not 18 inches. That's 1.5 feet deep.
Yeah, I guess they don't want a shop sink because I have a shop sink in my laundry room, which would be about 18 inches deep. But
That's what I was just going to say. That sounds like a laundry sink, not a kitchen
Mhm.
sink.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what they're saying. It can't be 18 inches deep. It has to be less than that.
Oh,
And to think our great state of California legislature probably discussed this.
well, that's why you pay them the big bucks.
Yeah, we're stuck with the definition. So
Okay, we're stuck with it. We're stuck with it. And we're not saying that a place can't have more than one, just be a single family either. In other words, a lot of people have a party room that might qualify as a kitchen or a outdoor kitchen anymore.
mhm.
Mhm.
So we're not limiting the number per house or anything.
Mhm.
On to the L's.
Yes. And there's quite a few. So we'll go with laboratory through land use element.
On land banking, pretty much the quotation can go away from
Yeah.
there all the way down.
Yeah, that's too much information.
Under landmark,
Mhm.
we can say who we are. We can take out local and put it in town. The town can establish a landmark and then
Yeah, it's too generic.
right.
Probably a capital T then.
I would think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Although there's a raging debate on that, Gene.
Oh,
Not internally, but with those of us that write these types of documents, and I always get a kick out of it. I like it the way you've done it there.
Yeah, me too. I'm a capitalizer on when we talk about the town. Any other comments on these?
Under land use element, do we need to add conservation to the last sentence or not?
how would you fit that in?
The reason I bring it up is because under our definition of open space, doesn't it include conservation?
So then would
Yeah.
it be parks, recreation, open space, and conservation?
Yeah. Okay. Let's
I think
back
we're
up
getting
just
wordy.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit here. This is the definition of the element itself. And the reason I'm kind of concerned about going too far down the hole is those are also elements. They're also mandatory elements. So we'd end up with this circular definition. Why don't we just end it after the first sentence?
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then just then we don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
For me,
And I struggled on land use. We have two sentences there, and I can see that. One is the purpose for which a land use is structure, and the other one is the occupation or utilization. So one is a regulatory definition, and the other one is the actual. And I guess they both belong there. But you could have a land use that is not defined in the general plan or zoning. So one is the actual, what's actually on the ground, and the other is the regulatory, what's expected to be on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to get that pedantic here?
Anders, what do you think? Are you out there?
I'm out here. It seems like too much. I almost feel like just going for the first sentence.
That's what I was thinking. But what was hanging me up is the purpose, which is a future tense, versus what can actually be on the ground. Is so you could have the purpose of it being, I don't know, a commercial structure, and what's actually on the ground is a house. And in our plan speak, we would say that the existing land use designation is for commercial. However, the current land use is a house.
It's a conflict between the general plan type of definition and a zoning definition.
Exactly.
Oh,
so I'm wondering whether we need to divide those two into two, because to me they're confusing, even though I know what they mean.
So should we have, say, land use, comma, general plan, and then land use zoning?
Or
And I
land
think
use.
that is where the difference is.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Now we just made it longer.
So if it's not defined in the general plan, then what? Are you still do it? If it's not defined, or it doesn't matter?
Oh, it has to be in the general plan so that you can do the zoning and other regulations. And also getting wordy, Christy, I'm thinking under land use designation that we have that sentence and then saying as designated on a land use diagram. Just to make it clear that that is a land use. Yeah. Instead of a, say the land use.
Thank you, Anders. That's where I was headed.
Yeah, not some other places. Diagram.
Hey,
Okay, Gene, do we need to capitalize land use diagram because it is a specific thing?
Oh, probably we do.
Yeah.
And maybe say the general plan.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Christy, would you just highlight land use definitions, and then maybe you, me, and Anders can wordsmith those for the community? Yeah.
I'm sorry, which one?
The land use general plan and land use zoning. Just put a note there for
Okay.
the three of us to kind of chat about that, or four of us with Mary Beth.
Okay.
Because
okay. Anything else that you see on your screen?
Do we have, you aren't there yet, and I don't want to make you have to go scroll down, but just, it says see mandatory element. So we just need to make sure that we have a mandatory element definition.
Right. Which I think is in there.
Okay.
I'll make a mental note. Okay, so I will.
Yeah, there is one.
Okay, good.
So back up here, anything else?
Hearing none.
Moving right along.
Okay. Anything on land use permit?
Yeah, I don't think you need the last sentence.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little,
Well,
yeah, we don't have to list them all.
right. That's what zoning codes are for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mhm. Okay, we'll go through level of service. There's more to level of service, but we can just start with that. So a lot of these are technical terms. So you have some sound terms here, LDN and LEQ, and then a traffic term.
Oddly specific for dry cleaning and laundry.
Mm-hmm.
Why? There an issue? Usually these things show up because there was an issue and somebody didn't want it to ever happen again.
Right. And it looks like this is something from the zoning code.
Yeah.
So I don't know if something happened in the past with that, where additional definition was added.
Now, Andy, was it your idea that this glossary would also serve for the zoning code as well?
That is correct. In fact, this glossary is serving for all documents in the town so that we have one glossary for everything. The problem was, Mark, there were conflicting definitions between things and caused us a little problem in reviewing projects. So
okay,
this way we have one document that covers it all.
Okay, so at the last part of that definition that begins, these facilities may include,
Mm-hmm.
that is regulatory, not definitional. And I'm worried though that if we take it out, there is another provision of the code that still regulates those things. So if we take
how
that
about highlight it, make a note that we make sure it's in the zoning code.
Okay.
And not in a definition, which is that is appropriate then.
Yeah, and it will be the next sentence too, Christy.
Yeah.
Mark, just for informational purposes, the definition, the glossary was done by this, at the end of the zoning ordinance, by the plan. That was the glossary that then went back over everything until a couple of years ago in the office, they added a different glossary. But the main glossary had been done at the end of the zoning ordinance so that we would not define things and then mess it up so they would match with whatever items we put in for the different allowed uses.
Yeah, from a practitioner standpoint, when they put regulations in the definitions, those are called gotchas, right? Because you read the regulations and they tell you what's supposed to do, but if you read the definition, sometimes it'll tell you something different. Like it's really common to pick up a zoning code that says fence. A fence should be no more than 6 feet tall in the definition. Then you can go to the regulatory piece and it can range from 6 to 10 feet. And you're kind of, well, they conflict. So that's just a pet peeve from my days of working the counter and having to reconcile those. But I get it. No, it's good. If we're going to take that out of the definition, as we probably should, then we need to make sure that it's somewhere else in the zoning code, so that a planner doesn't allow someone to do something the town didn't want.
Are we keeping a list of the things that we say should go in the zoning code so that when we get there, we'll know that those things we need to double check that we put back the things that we wanted to?
Yeah, this would be one of those items.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been putting that in the column to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what we can do is at the end of this process, we will take and copy and paste all of these, should be in the zoning code, and make one list for the zoning code once the general plan is adopted. So I think we'll keep this list going until we get to the commission before we go to the CEQA document. So the commission is going to review this compilation of committee documents, make the recommendation then that will go into the document for circulation. And it's at that point in time that we can then put this list together for the zoning code and that update.
What do you bet in 20 years there will not be such a thing as a coin operated laundry?
I don't know that it's going to take 20 years.
Yeah.
Kind of like telephone booth.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we get to talk about LOS. That's awesome.
Yes. Are we ready to go to that? Everything else looks all right?
What is BL?
Yeah, that's
Where are
Is it
you?
a typo?
line 24 or what?
24?
It says
Levels range BL from A to F. I had the same
Oh.
question.
Yeah.
Oh, huh. That's a good question.
Levels range maybe meant to put in between or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I think it's a typo.
I think it's a typo.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Delete that. Okay. I see some font changing here.
So just so this committee knows, level of service was kept in the circulation element by the circulation committee. Currently, you cannot use level of service for CEQA, but you can use it in the general plan. So that's why it's still here.
And so the thought process on that is because it's sort of in a transitional time and we're using vehicle miles traveled now. What is the thought process?
I think because you have traffic and that's going to affect your town operations and you don't really want to have a situation with traffic. So this leaving it in protects you from your own, although the state's not looking at it, you will want to look at it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just because CEQA doesn't consider it significant impact, the town might.
Right.
And the town could deny a project for being inconsistent with its general plan.
Correct.
There's not much here. This is the pretty, for the benefit of the community, this is pretty much the standard definition used throughout the state for level of service.
Well, will developers want to, spend money on these surveys since it's really no longer accepted?
They don't really have a choice.
Right.
Okay. I mean,
They're
they
gonna
just might.
Yeah,
I think
it's
what
not-
the state of California, I think that the state of California wants to use the
VMT.
VMT only so that your traffic becomes so bad you stay home.
Right.
So
Right.
by keeping your level of service, it says the town of Loomis is concerned about how often and how long you stop at a traffic light.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It
to
protects
answer your
you.
question, Greg, I'm sorry, Christy, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
For every action, every discretionary action that the town has to take or gets to take, they have to make a set of findings. And one of the very first findings is the proposed action consistent with the town's general plan? In order to make that finding, you have to have substantial evidence, which is a CEQA term, but it's also a legal term that says you have to prove that you're consistent. So the only way to prove that you're consistent would be to do a level of service analysis.
Okay. Yeah, because we'll need that interpretation down the road, possibly.
Absolutely. And I'm sure they will whine and cajole and
Yeah. Why am I
but
paying for that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, the ability to demonstrate that you are consistent with the town's general plan is not a CEQA event. CEQA doesn't care whether you're consistent with the general plan. It cares about the environment. And the courts have said many times that you can be inconsistent with the general plan and still be less than significant from an environmental perspective. So this just moves the needle a little further toward planning versus using the EIR to plan.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, these are all pretty just standard definitions in line with the circulation element. So let's move on to.
Well, what was that note and why is there?
Yeah, the number 2 there, that's, do we need that or
Yeah,
is
we
that
can get
something-
rid of that.
Yeah.
Let's get
or
rid of that. It's outdated.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's go from library to LAFCO.
may also include, I mean, that almost seems regulatory. And
it's more of a zoning thing.
I don't know that it's really, just put gift shops in the library. I'd be sad if I went to a botanical garden and I couldn't buy one of the plants.
But I don't know that we want to.
We don't want a gift shop on its own.
Accessory gift shop.
That works. Yeah. Light rail. Okay.
Are we going to have light rail in Loomis?
Wouldn't that be nice?
I want a trolley car. I think that'd be cool.
But with that said, the train depot here has museum-y things in it. Museum-y is a word.
I like it.
I guess my point is, should we say something about the train depot as an example or no?
I don't think that's necessary, Jan.
Historic site
No.
exhibit already.
Okay, all right. We just have displays of historical items. That is not considered a museum.
But we have historic site and exhibits as an
Exhibits.
example there.
Mm-hmm.
What's the history behind linkage on line 18?
And do we still have a linkage program? Does that the program exist?
I'm not.
I don't think that we have that program. I mean, I know what linkage is, but I haven't heard us ever apply
No,
it
I don't
to
know.
any- or-
I don't know.
I don't think we have that.
That
Okay.
definition is appropriate at all.
Okay.
Awfully progressive. We're just now getting to that. We're calling them community benefit plans, but we're getting that for negotiations between big warehousing and communities for not necessarily for jobs housing, but for EJ issues. But it's just
So,
surprising to see that here.
Would this ever be appropriate for Loomis or not really?
I don't think that we should take it out. I think we should leave it in, because if we were to get a large industrial or large commercial whatever that's going to create a need for specific housing, it would be nice to have it defined.
Yeah.
Although I guess we could always add it in. I don't know if it needs to be specifically in the general plan, though, I guess.
And I don't know that it needs to be jobs housing, just be impact to the town.
Okay, remember this is the town's glossary, so it's more than the general plan, Sean.
Yeah. No, I agree with Sean on that one. There's no harm in leaving it in. I was just
Right.
I would
kind of
leave it
shocked.
in.
It's a progressive thing. It's just now coming back around to many larger communities.
Is linkage spoken in the general plan? Is there a way we could sort of at another time search, see if we have it in there anywhere?
I can do
I've
that.
never heard that term used.
And I didn't see it at all when I read the general plan. Doesn't mean it isn't in there. It's a good call, but
But if it's there, then we've got it in the definitions if we ever want to use it, whether or not it's in the general plan.
I would say that we should probably look at that to be placed in the housing element, because that would be the appropriate place. So maybe it's
okay, somebody mute Anders. We're not changing the housing.
Yeah.
You
I'll go
will be
there.
in the future.
In 4 more years,
No, eight.
8 more years.
I just searched the Muni code and it's not mentioned anywhere in the Muni code.
Okay. Well, let me do a general plan search. It doesn't mean that we don't include it if it's not in there, but
If it's in there, I think the only detriment is that it would cause confusion for whoever might come upon it. That's all. And that, which is, I mean, I don't have an issue either way.
I do
There's
think
benefit.
that, yeah, I think that where it says the linkage program must establish, it should probably say a linkage, because the makes it sound like it's something
Yeah.
that we have existing.
Exactly. It makes, sounds
Yeah.
like it exists and
And
it doesn't.
it might just be called something different than linkage program.
Yeah, we've been calling them, or what the current term du jour is for that is a community benefit. But linkage
Maybe you
work-
could put a linkage or community benefit program. But then you got to put a
Then
definition
you're
for
gonna have
community
to
benefit.
define
yeah, start to unravel the sweater. Yeah. But anyway, I was just wondering if anybody knew how it got in there to begin with, but we can
Never,
move on.
never heard of it.
Link
Somebody
from,
was forward thinking 20 years ago.
Yes, like I said,
a link to our past. Thanks for getting my jokes.
I got it. So any comments on liquefaction or live work unit, LMAX, LAFCO?
Now, when we say live work unit here, it implies the same people are living and working compared to ordinary
excuse.
housing above the what are we calling it? An ordinary mixed use where it could be a renter that's not living there.
Right. This is linking it to be a space that the person who lives there is also working in that area, in that unit, essentially.
And then this is an addition to the general plan. This is a new definition.
No.
Live
No,
work.
I believe this is from the zoning code.
Yeah, because
And the
it's not
reason
in our it's not in our old glossary.
But I think we reference live work someplace in something
it's-
about where in some reference strikes me as it's there someplace on mixed use structures, referring them to some places to live.
It is in the zoning code, Gene.
What it is.
Yeah, and when you look under live work definitions, when you're on the table in the zoning code.
Yeah, see, Jan, I think it is in there.
Oh, I'm looking at the general plan glossary from 20 years ago, and it's not.
Yeah, it's a zoning code definition.
Definition, yeah.
So the question is, do we care if people are the same people as have the job or not?
Yes.
How would you even regulate it?
It comes down to where it's located, and some businesses require or like to have on-site security during the night, so they convert a portion of the commercial structure to a live work unit, and that way they have 24/7 protection on site.
But again, would we care whether it's an owner or just a renter? I don't know. I don't feel strongly about it. It doesn't. I think it's an archaic definition that isn't used much anymore, but that's fine. There's no-
I would agree with that. I
no
think
reason
for
to-
purposes of use permits and minor use permits, a live work unit, at least under our zoning code, is an allowable use. If you're making just a dwelling unit out of it in a commercial zone, it wouldn't be applicable.
Yeah, we used to call those for like industrial, we call it a caretaker's unit.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, it's probably just fine as it is.
Yeah, there's no harm in leaving.
Let's just keep moving on.
Yep, rock and roll.
Thank you, Tim.
So
So It's 5 o'clock. And the last, you guys want to go to the last word on this sheet?
Yeah, that would be great if we could just
Okay.
make a clean start on the next page for the next time.
Sounds good. So we're on LMAX.
Yes.
And that seems.
It's a sound terminology. It's going to be in your noise element.
Yeah, LAFCO can have a one sentence definition.
Okay.
I mean, we only have one LAFCO that applies to us. It's the Placer County LAFCO. And it could be, that definition could be specific to, it could just say the Placer County LAFCO, and, with authority over special, annexations and special districts. So. No other LAFCO has any authority over activities.
Right. Okay, let me just.
This kind of explains every LAFCO in the state.
You want to fix it and come back?
Yeah.
With that
Yeah.
forth?
Yeah, we'll fix it and come back.
And then we have lot or parcel.
So I would just say a recorded lot or parcel of real property, period.
Yeah. All right. Maybe I will leave site in there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Because you can have multiple owners.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got multiple ownership.
Yes, right. Okay.
And recorded implies it's probably lawfully created, we hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of redundancy.
Right. Right.
Just for
I will tell you, I've seen where parcels have been created unlawfully, but they're still recorded. But that's kind of in today.
Well, you're correct on that, aren't you? So
it doesn't matter for this definition. It's just a recorded lot or parcel of real property.
I think that's fine.
okay.
On the next page, is there a picture?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, lot goes beyond this one
Yeah.
sentence here. We have quite a bit, and this is all from the zoning code here. So it defines the difference between a corner lot and a flag lot. And
You tricked us.
Yeah.
Surprise.
So let's just go back.
We'll just stop up here.
Go back and we'll stop before lot.
Yes.
Because we've had a lot of fun today.
Oh, damn.
Too much fun.
Good joke, that girl.
Okay.
All right.
So I'll do some cleaning up here, and this time I'll remember to give it to Mary Beth to share with you all before the next meeting.
Okay, and so Mary Beth, when is our next meeting?
Sure. So we have, next week we have the downtown business corridor meeting in Parks and Rec. So we'll have some additional information coming from that. Our next regular meeting of this committee is scheduled for November 4th at 3:00. But then on November 11th, we've got the Sierra College Boulevard Northwest Committee meeting. So I think if we could look to November 4th to continue this glossary discussion, by the time the other subcommittees wrap up, then we'll only have one meeting left to review all of their recommendations.
And just a word of warning, I might have jury duty that week.
Oh, that's right.
Use my get out of jail card free. So get out of jail free card. And so I've got to report this time.
Okay, so November 4th is questionable.
Questionable.
Well, I
Okay.
can try and do it for Christy, but I'm not as good as Christy is.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Andy. You could do a great job, but hopefully I won't have jury duty. That's what we're all aiming for, right? Say a little prayer that I don't.
Well, if you don't have jury duty, then there's, we can certainly reconvene in maybe a week or after the 11th, which would be that subcommittee. So, and there might be some subcommittees finished up by then. So
yeah,
we'll wait to hear from you, Mary Beth.
Okay, so for now, let's go ahead and schedule it for November 4th, 3 o'clock. And then if something changes, we'll look to the following week or the week after. Note to committee, I will be out of the office beginning November 18th through Thanksgiving. So then we start running into holidays and stuff. But if we can't do it during the week of, let's say, the 11th or the 8th, then maybe the 15th, 16th, 17th might work too. So
Okay.
November 4th, we're good for now on.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good evening tonight, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.